In this video, we will get introduced to Basel III and also we will take a look at Basel II versus Basel III side by side. So Basel III, which was introduced in December 2000, which was agreed by committee in December 2010, maintained the three-pillar structure of Basel II. If you remember, in Basel II there were three pillars: capital adequacy ratio, supervisory review, and market disclosure. It maintained those three-pillar structure because theoretically that should help a lot to the financial health of the whole environment. However, it acted hugely on the shortcomings of Basel II. So Basel III intend to address shortcoming of Basel II to create more stable banking and financial sectors. And if you take a look, the main of the Basel III can be stated as improve banks' ability to absorb losses and shocks. Secondly, to improve risk management and governance. And third, strengthens banks' transparency and disclosure. If you go and take a look at shortcomings of Basel II, what you will realize, these were the main issues due to which it created little instability in the financial sector. So Basel III intended to aim these three things. And what are the major features of Basel III? First of all, it provided a stricter definition of capital. What qualifies to be capital and what not, it became more clear. Secondly, it says that common equity, which was 2%, the norm was 2% in Basel II, it said it has to be minimum 4.5. Why? Because if you think of common equity is something which is the first level of support to you and it's available to the firm to absorb losses and shocks. And that's why when you increase this 4.5, it definitely enhances the firm's stability, firm's ability to absorb these things. It also said the T1 on capital, which was 4% norm in Basel II, it should be minimum 6%. It introduced one more term which is called capital conservation buffer of 2.5% of the risk-weighted asset. Due to which, what happened, like in Basel II, all said and done you are keeping 8% of the total risk-weighted asset as the required capital. That became 10.5% in Basel III because you are keeping additional 2.5%. It introduced a mandatory leverage ratio. Leverage ratio is the tier 1 capital to a total asset to 3%. It means if you are putting $3 million as the tier 1 capital, then your total assets should not go beyond $100 million. So that your total leverage ratio should be minimum 3%. Your total asset can go up to only 100 million, which means you are limiting the bank's freedom to keep adding assets with regard to capital. So it is addressing that how far you can go for a given capital. And if you go next, what you will realize, it recommends better liquidity ratio. The norms are expected by 2015, means. It also introduced a new term which is called counter-cyclical buffer. What it says that when you are in stress or bad time, use this. So this buffer you can keep at 0% when you are in a stressed or bad scenario. But when you are healthy, keep it minimum 3%. So that you have money, you have the ability to absorb losses and shocks during the bad time. So that's why it is called counter-cyclical. And also systematic important financial institutions, which are essentially those big financial institutions where instability means probably the instability of the whole industry, they are expected to go much beyond Basel III recommendations. Now let's take a look at Basel II versus Basel III side by side. So Basel III introduced the capital conservation buffers of 2.5%, which was not at all there in Basel II, due to which the minimum ratio of total capital to risk-weighted asset, which used to be 8% in Basel II, is actually 10.5% in Basel III. Minimum ratio of common equity to risk-weighted asset, which was 2% in Basel II, became 4.5%. Tier 1 capital to risk-weighted asset, which was 4%, became 6% here. Leverage ratio, which was not at all there in Basel II, became 3% here. And the leverage ratio for 8 CFIs in US, 8 big banks were identified as CFIs, systematic important financial institution in US in 2013, and it was mandated that they should keep a leverage ratio of 8%. Means if they are putting $8 million, they can go up to 100 million. If they are putting $4 million, they can go only up to $50 million. Counter-cyclical buffer, again, that was not at all there in Basel II. It became 0 to 2.5%. 0% when you are under stress, 2.5 when you are healthy scenario. Minimum liquidity coverage ratio, that was not there in Basel II. The norm is expected to come in 2015, and the same way for the net stable funding ratio.